inspired by a true Reddit horror story. When Emily was 10 years old, she shared a room with her younger sister, Sophie. Their parents always insisted on an early bedtime, so by 9 p.m., they were usually under the covers, whispering to each other until they fell asleep. One night, Sophie shook Emily awake. "There's someone under the bed," she whispered, her voice trembling. Emily groaned, half asleep. "It's just your imagination. Go to sleep." But Sophie didn't stop. "Please, just check." Annoyed, Emily sighed and flipped onto her stomach, peering under the bed with the flashlight on her phone. She expected to see a pile of forgotten toys or maybe a sock. Instead, she saw eyes staring back at her. A man was curled up under their bed, his face pale and twisted into a grin. Emily shot up so fast that she nearly fell off the mattress. Sophie saw the terror on her face and started crying. Summoning all her courage, Emily grabbed Sophie's hand and ran for the door. They dashed down the hall, screaming for their parents. Their father stormed into the room, flicking on the light. He bent down, ready to pull the intruder out. But the space under the bed was empty. The girls refused to sleep in their room that night. But as Emily lay on the couch, she couldn't shake the feeling that something, was still watching them. The next morning, when their father checked again, they found something disturbing. The vent near the bed was open, leading into a narrow crawl space. Someone had been there. Someone had been hiding. And they might still be close. Story 5: The Smiling Man. Based on a true creepy encounter from Reddit. A few years ago, James was walking home from a late-night shift at a diner. He lived just a few blocks away, so he always walked rather than calling for a ride. The streets were empty, the only sound being his own footsteps echoing against the pavement. Then, he saw him. A man stood under the dim streetlights a few yards ahead. He was tall, lanky, dressed in a suit that seemed outdated. But the strangest thing was his face. He was smiling. Not just a friendly smile. A wide, exaggerated grin that stretched unnaturally across his face, his teeth bared like he was frozen in a manic laugh. James slowed his pace. The man wasn't moving, just standing there, grinning at him. Trying to ignore him, James crossed to the other side of the street. But as soon as he did, the man mirrored his movement, stepping into the road with that same eerie smile plastered on his face. James quickened his pace. The man did too. Now panicking, James broke into a sprint. He didn't look back. He ran, his heart pounding, until he reached his apartment building. He fumbled for his keys, hands shaking, and as he glanced over his shoulder, his blood ran cold. The man was right there, standing in the middle of the street. Still smiling. James darted inside, slamming the door behind him. He ran to his window, looking out. The man was gone. For weeks, James was too afraid to walk home alone. He never saw the smiling man again, but sometimes, when he walked past a dark alley or an empty street, he felt like someone was watching. based on a true horror story. When Daniel was 17, he and his friends decided to go camping in the dense woods near their town. It was supposed to be a fun weekend, just a group of teenagers, a bonfire, and ghost stories. On the first night, everything seemed normal. They set up camp, cooked dinner, and sat around the fire, laughing and telling scary stories. But as the night wore on, something felt off. The woods were too quiet. No crickets. No owls. Just silence. Then, around 2 a.m., they heard footsteps. At first, they assumed it was an animal. But as the sound grew louder, they realized it was walking on 2 legs. One of Daniel's friends, Mike, grabbed a flashlight and pointed it toward the trees. "Hello," he called. The light swept over the dense forest until it landed on a figure standing between the trees. It was a man. But something was wrong. His body was thin, almost unnatural, his limbs slightly too long. He was wearing tattered clothes, his arms hanging limply at his sides. And then, as the flashlight beam moved up to his face, they saw it. He had no face. No eyes. No nose. Just smooth, pale skin stretching where his features should have been. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the figure tilted its head, as if listening. Suddenly, it took a step forward. Panic exploded in the group. Daniel grabbed his backpack, yelling, "Run!" They sprinted toward their car, crashing through the trees, tripping over roots. Behind them, the footsteps followed, slow but deliberate. They didn't stop until they reached the car. Mike fumbled with the keys, hands shaking, finally managing to start the engine. As they sped down the dirt road, Daniel dared to look back. The faceless man was standing at the edge of the trees, still watching. They never went back to those woods.